Let's start White's clock, please.
May the winner win.
Good luck. Shake hands.
This was round 2 of the October Rising Star tournament in Mesa, Arizona. And I had won the first round, and I was hoping to play a solid game today with my Jaba London. I had the white pieces. And there's something that I did wrong, really wrong in this game. My opponent I played once before and I beat him with the white pieces. But I don't know why, but in this game I just felt that I needed to play super safe. And I wanted to play safe because I just felt that I always ended up blundering or doing something too aggressive, too stupid. I was just thinking, let's play as safe as possible. Nothing wild. I wanna just play so solid and safe. That was my only real thought going into this game. And I think it's a thought that I don't need to have. All I need to do in chess is play good moves, go for an attack if I can, but like keep improving my position, going for good play. But this game, because of how passive I played, I got into a lot of trouble. You're going to see what happens. Right now we have the starting position of Jaba London, and he's put his knight on c6, which is a little odd. Generally, there's a knight on f6 here, and I would know exactly what to play, but having the knight so early on c6 is weird. I would normally want to just play my knight to b5 here and go after that pawn, but I didn't know if this was best. I was trying to think through all the moves in my mind. Knight to b5, how does he defend that c7 pawn? Well, I was thinking he has to push e5. That made the most sense to me. Then I could take on e5, and then he can't take back on e5. And I was forgetting that there was this queen sack line with queen takes on d5, and the knight jumps into c7, forking the queen and the king. But regardless, I go for the move, knight b5. The engine doesn't love it. It's not the most perfect move. Technically, e3 is a wee bit more solid, and I can just play for like some kingside development and then castle and then playing for the e4 pawn break. That's probably how I should play it. However, this line could be a little tricky if my opponent doesn't deal with it correctly. However, he does deal with it correctly. Top move, bishop d6. I knew that I had to take this bishop and force the doubled pawns. He can't recapture with the queen because my bishop's looking at that square. So he has the doubled pawns here. And I know that I recently got into trouble online by playing my bishop out to d3. So I know what his plan is here. And so I try to play sort of preemptively, not allowing any crazy pawn fork. So basically his idea will be e5 and then e4, forking my knight on f3, my bishop on d3. And I wanted to not fall into this trap, so I thought about playing the move h3, preparing a hidey hole for my bishop and a more passive bishop to e2 instead of d3. Here my opponent plays his knight to f6, and I respond with knight to f3. My opponent castles, as he should, and I play the very slow and passive move h3. Why do I make this move? I just don't want his knight coming to h5 and me having to give up my bishop. So I think this move's fine, but it's not super active. He puts his rook onto the e file. And now I have to be very careful. He's got a knight looking at e5, a pawn on d6 looking at e5, and a rook defending the e5 square, even though it's sort of an x-ray defense right now. 3 pieces defending that push, and I have 3 defenders of the push. I don't want that push to trouble my bishop, and so here I just simply pull my bishop back to h2. I think this was my biggest mistake so far. Bishop back to h2 didn't need to happen until his knight attacked my bishop. So after I made this move, I started to realize I'm kind of allowing him to dictate the game. I'm letting his plans be pushed, and I'm just responding to whatever he does, which is not how you should play chess. You should take the initiative and you shouldn't give it up. Now he moves in with e5. He's starting to push his agenda, his plans. I would be fine here if I simply played c3, but that seemed a little tricky for me to play. I didn't like the look of e4 and then pulling back my knight to d2. Just, it seemed really, really bad. I was feeling like I was going to get cramped, but that is the way to play this. If he took on d4, then I could just recapture with the knight, have a knight stuck in the middle of the board. He's got two isolated pawns. I'd be doing pretty okay there. Yeah, totally fine, even though I'm a little cramped. But taking the pawn on e5 was not correct. And this was a move that I went for. It allows him to undouble his pawns if that's what he wants. And that is what he wanted. And he now has central control, and I don't have central control. And these two pawns begin to be a big headache for me. I decided to play pawn to c3. He goes a6, which I think was a good move, stopping my bishop developing. So I just put my bishop on e2 and get ready to castle. He goes bishop f5 with 4 defenders now of the e4 push. So I'm not entirely sure if I should just castle immediately here, but getting out of the center definitely did seem good because the e3 pawn is definitely probably going to have to take something at some point. So castling seemed the most logical here. It was the best engine move. He pulls his queen up to b6, eyeing my b2 pawn. Don't really like this move. It seems quite active. I didn't know here if I should go queen c2 just to defend that pawn, if I should go rook b1. The engine really likes queen b3, and the position's completely equal there. But if we exchange queens on b3, I would have double pawns. So I didn't think that was best. Rook b1 didn't work because of the bishop on f5. Starting to see that I wasn't finding a good move here. I actually find the second best move according to the engine, which was knight h4. I was hoping to maneuver that bishop somewhere and potentially play rook b1, was sort of in my mind. But I also didn't like that he could go e4 and kick my knight away. Knight h4 seemed good. He pulls his bishop back to e6, which I actually really liked because now he only has one defender of that pawn on e5. I was thinking here maybe going back knight f3 immediately. And if this was going to be a forced draw, I almost was ready to take it because I didn't like how strong his center was. It just seemed from the get-go of this game that I was playing too passive, and ever since I moved bishop h2, I wasn't feeling confident. I thought I did that without being forced to go h2, and so I knew that my initiative was, lost, and I was sort of on the back foot this entire game. That's how I was feeling. So probably what I should have done is just gone queen b3 and then, traded those queens when I had that chance, and then started to try and get active with my pieces. But yeah, going for a draw here, I was okay with it. I decided to play the queen to c2, just protecting that pawn. I needed to find some way to protect it. This seemed the most solid. He pulls his rook over to d8, getting ready to push that pawn through the center, I suppose. And here I thought I had to bring that knight back from the rim, back onto f3. I play knight to f3. I was a little surprised here. The top engine move for him is actually knight e4. And that just gives up the pawn on e5. And I would have had to calculate this, but if I had taken the pawn on e5 with my knight, and he took my knight on e5 with his knight, and then I captured with my bishop, he actually can sacrifice his bishop on h3. And if I recapture it, g takes h3, he wins my bishop on e5, and his queen can come to g6, check, looking like a completely crushing attack. So thankfully, he missed that. He played his bishop back to c8. I was actually winning in this position. All I have to do is play rook ad1 or fd1, or even a slow move like a3. But psychologically, I just felt like I was losing still. I actually find the best move here, rook fd1. Pretty happy with that. But the reason I felt like I was losing was because if you look at all the pieces that are looking at d4 for him, he's got a pawn on e5, he's got a rook on d8, he's got a knight on c6, and he's got a queen on b6. So he's got 4 defenders once he makes that push, and I only have 4 attackers. The pawns, the 2 pawns, and a rook and a knight. So I wasn't feeling so good about this. If he pushes, I take with a pawn, he takes with a pawn, I take with a pawn, he takes with a knight, I take with a knight, he takes with a rook, I take with a rook, he takes with a queen, and wins a piece. So what am I going to do? I couldn't actually do all those calculations in my head, and I didn't see the position is completely equal there. He doesn't actually win a piece. I win both of his pawns and his rook and his knight, and he wins both of my pawns and my rook and my knight. Because I'm the first one to capture, and he's the last one to capture. So it's actually equal. Don't know why that was such a struggle for me to see that. But it was. And so this really stressed me out. I think what I need to do is some simplification tactics on chess.com, just so I can improve at this. He pushed e4, and I had been doing these calculations in my mind. Couldn't figure it out. And so I made the wrong move. I thought it was best to play e4. However, he finds a really nice resource here. He plays queen c5, putting more pressure on the c3 pawn. Now I can't take on d4 because I lose my queen. Thought this was quite clever. He's now threatening to take on c3. I take with the pawn, and I have an isolated pawn on the c file, isolated pawn on the a file, and not looking so good. I decided to play my knight back to d2. I wasn't super happy with this. Here, if he takes my pawn on c3, I can simply just recapture, or I can use my knight and play it to b3, which is kind of what I was thinking. Hopefully that would be a way for me to kick his queen away, and then I could capture back on c3 and not cause isolated pawns. He just plays his queen back to a7. Solid enough. He's still defending that pawn on d4 multiple times. And I didn't really know what to do here. So I just decided to go with the move king h1. Getting out of the way of that sort of queen pin. And I thought maybe what I can do is push f3. And that would lock my pawn nicely on e4. Right now I felt like I had sort of to be tied down to defending it, and I wanted to free up all my pieces, so this is why I played this. King h1, however, was not a great move because he can simply take on c3 here and then go knight b4, and my whole position's kind of starting to fall apart. He does take on c3. I recapture with the queen, and now he can snag that pawn on f2, which I completely missed. I knew that his queen was on a7, and the reason I moved the king was so that I would get out of that pin, but he captured the pawn. I was kind of annoyed with myself. I'm really thankful that actually he missed a beautiful move. Instead of taking on f2, he could have done rook takes d2, and if my rook recaptured on d2, then he has knight takes e4, hitting my queen, hitting my rook. If my queen captures on d2, he has knight takes e4, hitting my queen and my pawn on f2, which the queen is already hitting, and he can take on f2, and that forks my king and my rook. So I'm very thankful that he played the move queen takes f2 here. So many opportunities for him to get ahead, not playing well here. I thought the best way in this position to sort of solidify everything was going bishop f3, holding the pawn on e4, holding the pawn on g2, but my bishop's now just a super pawn, not really doing a whole lot. If you don't know what to do in a position, just look at your least developed piece and try to put it on the most active square. I think that's what my opponent did here. He saw his bishop on c8 wasn't a great piece, and he put it on e6. I really didn't like this move. I was hoping that maybe I could get my queen on that light square diagonal looking at f7. Maybe I could get my bishop to h5. I don't know. It was all a bit hopeful. Maybe pulling my bishop back to e2 and then bringing it around so that it looks at f7. But bishop e6 just sort of shuts down all my plans. And I just kind of felt here, like if I could get a draw in this game, I'd be pretty happy. I tried to develop my knight into the game, putting it on c4. Eyeing that pawn on e5, and that pawn is now eyed twice, only defended once again, and so this move made sense to me. He put his bishop on e6. Initially, earlier he had pulled it back to c8 to defend that pawn, so I was just trying to force him to figure out a way to how is he going to deal with defending the pawn on e5. Now that my opponent was up in some material, he just decided to trade off on c4, which I quickly took back, and the position felt a bit more open now. Maybe there were some more chances for me, but he's up material, so I was still hoping that I could maybe find a way to draw this game. He took the pawn on b2. I was just thinking, why am I hanging so many pawns? This is just not good by me. Instead of recapturing that bishop on the previous move on c4, it would have been better for me to go bishop g1, hitting his queen would go to h4, and then I could take the bishop on c4, or swap off some rooks, and then take on c4. That way I don't lose the b2 pawn, but I'm just playing quick, I'm not thinking, and not good chess. I try to tempo his queen. I know here he can capture on d1. I'd have to recapture on d1, and then his queen is not in danger. This is what he does. I have to recapture, and I just felt like being down 2 pawns here, my chances of drawing this game were dwindling quite quickly. I capture back. And he responds with queen b4, offering a queen trade. Taking his queen here, he can take with knight, and I'm just down 2 pawns still. I knew if I wanted to have any chances, got to keep the queens on. I offered my opponent a draw, which he declined. I moved my queen to d3, just keeping it on a good square, active on the d file. I know here that if he goes rook d8, I can take, he takes. I can take on d8 with my rook. He can go back to f8 with his queen. I take, he takes, and I'd be winning that endgame big time, but no such hope. My opponent's not going to do anything so stupid. I do think psychologically he was maybe hoping to draw himself because his rating was about 100 points less than mine was. So, draw for him would be really good. I need to try for the win. I'm the one who cares more about winning. So I can understand why he decided to do what he was about to do. He pulls his queen to a very interesting square. It's just very obvious what he wants. He wants to trade queens. I know that if he's able to trade queens, it's going to make his life a whole lot easier. So I just go back to b3. Here he pulls his queen over to b4. And I'm wondering, he's repeated the position once. Are we going to go for a draw? So I pull my queen back to d3. He tries something a little different, going back to e7. Here I decide I don't mind going back to b3. Looking at that pawn on b7, I just pull my queen back to b3. He can't put his queen on b4. Well, he can. But I think it's getting close to threefold repetition. And so now I'm thinking, is he going to go for this? Or are we going to get a draw? He decides after thinking for a while, he'll take a draw. And I said, yeah, no bother. I'll take a draw. Was happy to get that. Being down a couple pawns in the position, I didn't want to go into an endgame being down a few pawns. I think he would just win that. I didn't really see any real way to get a victory there. So a draw seemed like the best result. This was round 2 of the tournament, and I was 1.5 out of 2 points. I was okay with this, but I need to not play so passive. The engine said I play with a 70.9% accuracy and my opponent with a 75.7%. I was never winning in the game. I need to play better than I did. Gonna have to step it up for rounds 3 and 4 of this tournament. Thanks for watching, lads. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you all very soon.